Welcome in, Chronic Hoosier. And Chronic, we were just talking in the break about the talks that are being engaged in right now to reach a legal settlement that would lay out the framework for revenue sharing with athletes in a future NCAA business model, and that is per ESPN. Uh, is that just something that is imminent and that has to happen to put some guardrails on college athletics right now, because it is the wild west with virtually no restraints. I mean, there is little to nothing that can be done. We're seeing right now that all the people that were charged with gambling out in Iowa last year, not only was there a big snag hit in that, now they're being sued over it. So that's coming back to bite them. But this would be a way. Is this a way to actually be contractual in a way with some of these athletes?
I think it's the only way, and I think that's what the NCAA has discovered. And when we say the NCAA, let's be honest, we're talking about the schools, the member institutions that comprise the body. The NCAA is pretty much just the shell that they use as the shield to hide their terrible decisions. But no, this is what has been the biggest obstacle so far, and the biggest cause of all the lawsuits they've lost is they have placed restrictions on student athletes that don't apply to any other student at the universities, that the courts have deemed to be anti-competitive, and they continue to lose case after case because of the restrictions that are only applied to these athletes. And the watershed moment is going to be when they stop calling them amateur student athletes and start addressing them by what's probably a proper legal moniker, which is employees. The NIL system, while it has allowed the athletes to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness, the schools have basically offloaded or outsourced the payment side of it. And by deeming them employees, it allows them to bring that process in-house, direct payment to the players, true pay for play model. But as employees, you then have the freedom to contract with your employees, no different than we do in almost every other business setting. And the parties are free to contract whatever they choose within certain parameters. But that's the beginning point. And then from there, I think you'll see, there's going to be some collective bargaining, which is what happens when you have labor. They have they have issues they're going to push, and they're going to band together, if not unionize, and continue to push for more and more. And that's part of the process. We see it happening for centuries now in all other industries, and the modern reality has probably caught up with the game, where this is the only other option they have in order to kind of contain and corral some of the chaos that they've unleashed by through their insistence on not calling the spade the spade. So I think that'll be a first step. I think once you see that, you'll be able to see commitments, restrictions, a lot of the stuff that the schools had enjoyed previously can be contracted back into the relationship now, and if nothing else, just provide a clearly articulated list of rights and responsibilities of the parties, where everybody kind of knows what's up. And this wild west, world that college athletics has become, hopefully gets a little less wild and a little bit more tame. Because as today's the close of the portal, I can't fathom what it's like to be a coach or an assistant, position coach, whatever, coordinators, with the free flowing nature of rosters today. You've got teams like IU that have already played their spring game. They've gone through spring camp. They're getting ready to head into summer workouts, and you've still got departures. Now you
You
still got
just
to go
lost
do some
your probably number one
cornerback.
defensive back.
Yeah, it's just chaos, and as frustrating as it must be, they have to understand too that's a product of their own making, by their insistence on their failed position to keep the status quo. And I think with the House settlement, you'll probably see a return to something that's more familiar, and whether it be a minimum 2-year commitment to a program, or else you have to sit out before transferring. pay scales. Uh, it's going to be fascinating to see what changes come from it. But I think it's a step in the right direction, a step towards bringing some sanity back. But as is the case with a lot of law, if nothing else, uh, clarity and foreseeability. Markets love predictability. It allows you to operate with some certainty in your decision making. And right now, there's none of that. So um, hopefully, things get a little bit more civil and a little bit fairer for all of the parties, because I think that's been the underlying struggle throughout. Is the system as currently constructed hasn't always been fair to all the parties, primarily the students. But now you've got staffs with legitimate, just mind-numbing decisions and changes that are constantly coming at them. That's just made it extraordinarily difficult to operate in this environment. So hopefully, this is the beginning of a better future. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be the future that everybody wants to see when it's all said and done. I would not be surprised by the time this is all said and done if the revenue sports at least don't basically disassociate from the universities, other than in name and images and branding, and just basically license out the logo and the name and the stadiums, and just drop the facade of academics altogether. Now, that's not to say that some kids won't be able to go earn a degree, but for years, college athletics has been a subsidized minor leagues for both basketball and football. And while all the other leagues have figured out how to do that under their own business model, I would not be surprised if you see the revenue sports, football and basketball particularly, trend in that direction over time here. And who knows what that becomes? That you know, then you start getting into some of the issues with the pro sports where they're constantly shopping for better deals from their municipalities, their local hosts, whether it be for stadiums or whatever rights. And that's one of the things that's always been nice about college athletics is Indiana University ain't just packing up and going somewhere that wants to build them a shinier new stadium. But I think you're going to see it continue to track closer and closer to pro sports.
I agree, but at this point, it has to in some degrees because there has just been no control because the NCAA has had no control. They've lost all control. Everything they would do, they would lose in court because they would. It's like they just, hey, we're going to do this, and no one checked the legalities of it or challenged the legalities of it until they were, and then they lost. And now there are almost no rules as far as transferring. Do whatever you wish, which that is not a sustainable model in any stretch of the imagination. Just the cost to replacing players that you did not expect to lose has to be an ungodly amount of money, especially in totality. The billions and billions of dollars I bet it has added up to if you take all the universities just for that issue alone.
Yeah, and look at what pro sports have done. Ownership groups decided, leagues decided that they needed to implement cost controls, so they instituted salary caps and taxes and all the other fee structures that keep it workable within what the corporate management is comfortable doing. And I think that's likely something that follows soon after you allow direct payments from schools to the athletes. Is we have to ascertain what a fair market value is, and try to find some semblance of sanity in the process. Because right now, value is basically whatever your biggest booster feels like he wants to spend in order to watch a winning program. And among other things, there's certainly a vanity element to that as well. But it's been purely chaotic when it's just become pure unabashed capitalism, which isn't always a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm a free market guy through and through. It's just really difficult to comprehend, the 13th man on the bench who's pulling in $500,000 a year, just because, you've got a war chest that says we can spend that on that guy. And that's where the market currently is now. I wouldn't be surprised if once things get brought back in house and allow for direct payment, that you don't see a recalibration of value in that regard. Because let's be honest, the 13th guy on most benches is not a $500,000 man anywhere in the country, and maybe shouldn't be anywhere. But at the end of the day, the market will figure that out. But when everybody's playing on a level playing field by rules that are mutually agreed upon and negotiated and exchanged for, then I think you start to see a clearer picture of what the future is going to hold.
And that brings up the possibility, or will there be the possibility, if they were able to go that route, but of having that type of relationship, an employee relationship, will there be the possibility of having salary caps of some sort to limit what to try to equalize things, which is exactly what the pro sports levels do. They try to equalize it as best they can. You're not going to be able to equalize New York and Oakland, but they're they have the ability to spend so much. But uh, is there any? You think there will be any kind of control that way?
I don't think there's any way around it, honestly. I think just from a competitive balance standpoint, um, I think it's going to be imperative that they do, because otherwise you're going to continue to have the same system that we've always had, whether it was illicit or expressly endorsed, where um, you know you have a different tier based off your booster class. And they have figured out in most pro sports that that's not desirable. um, we'll see if college has the same sanity in that regard. But again, that's going to be something that has to be bargained for. And once you acknowledge the athletes are employees, they have the rights to organize, they have the right to unionize, they have the right to push for what they feel like is a fair deal, and the schools are going to have to be on board with it. It's a two-way street once you get to that point, but at least everybody's has a seat at the table, the opportunity for the voices to be heard, and ultimately the market's going to figure out where those price points probably should be set.
And speaking of which, Indiana just Zach Osterman reporting that about to go into another 10-year deal with Adidas. I wonder if they built in some NIL funds into that. I would not be shocked though if they did not incorporate some kind of language that says you've got to support, or we need you to support X number of athletes through NIL in this sport, that sport, whatever, however it goes, some form or fashion. Is that something you think went into this or might have gone into this?
I think this is a fascinating deal. I'll be really interested to see the language when it comes out in the specific terms. Um, what really caught my eye when I saw that report this morning is the duration of the contract. Um, this is this is one another contract cycle where Indiana is at the table with diminished leverage based off of the recent success of football, or the lack thereof success with football and basketball. It seems like whenever this contract comes up, Indiana's typically at a in a trough competitively, or a nadir. But that being said, um, I think it's fascinating, in as much as with all the changes currently taking place. I think one of the things that you will continue to see increasingly, the shoe companies no longer need the schools to access the athletes. And short of the sideline agreements and what all constraints those may place, athletes are free to contract with whomever they want to now, so long as it doesn't violate, pre-existing team contracts. So uh, the flip side of that coin is the shoe companies who have, let's be honest, they have basically bankrolled both college athletics as well as the AAU circuit for decades now, simply so that they could have access to the talent in the event that they reach the pro levels, they could then sponsor and use as endorsers. Now they can do that directly without having to go through the school. So I think you will probably see increasingly over time less and less investment in the sideline contracts with the universities, and more direct investment in the athletes. So being able to lock up whatever terms they've achieved in this agreement for a decade now kind of insulates them from some of that coming in down the road, because I think you'll probably see that industry moving more in the direct compensation direction rather than spreading it across the teams. And that's not to say that, universities still aren't going to look for sideline partners, because schools ain't trying to buy their own shoes and jerseys and warm ups and everything else. That's a very significant part of the compensation package. But as far as the dollars that it puts directly into the school coffers, I think you're going to see those numbers diminishing significantly over time, as the apparel companies go directly to the athletes, not having to use the schools. So, um, the devil's going to be in the details. The terms will be released at some point here in the future, it seems like. But for the time being, I think it's notable that Adidas continues to see value in Indiana amongst a shrinking stable. Um, and sees fit to continue that partnership in spite of the lack of national prominence and on field success, at least as far as the main revenue sports. I do think it's going to be really interesting to see how they continue to invest in women's sports, because as anybody who's been to a women's basketball game over the last 10 years has seen, that is a rapidly growing market segment for them that I think will only continue to get better and bigger. And I think Indiana has been, pretty well positioned to help capitalize on that with the investments it's made in particularly women's basketball, but women's sports across the board. Um, Make no mistake, I know there's a lot of teams that wear the Adidas, um, apparel that are specifically for that. I'm looking at soccer and what Coach Van Bennekom has done there. I think you're going to continue to see increasing investment in women's sports, in no small part because the apparel companies have a vested interest in growing that part of the business, and hopefully that raises the level of competitiveness and investment and resources spent on the women's teams. But um, I think at the end of the day, I know a lot of folks were interested in seeing a change, whether it be Nike or Jordan Brand or whomever. But you can only dance with the one that you went with. And, I don't know that Indiana had a lot of suitors beating their door down to take that business over at the moment, simply because Indiana hasn't proven to be an extraordinarily marketable brand. Now, that being said, there's a sleeping beast just waiting to be awoken. And we've seen it in years past when there's been a hint of success. IU has over a 750,000 living alumni who, as you know full well, or anybody that's online knows, they tend to get a little excited when the Hoosiers are doing good. And they do that. They speak with their pocketbooks. So if you can give them something to cheer for, Indiana fans will absolutely buy your stuff that supports the program. So hopefully some success follows. But at the end of the day, it's the brand it's probably going to continue to be gear that's difficult to come by simply because of the way Adidas is modeled and how they produce and distribute. But I just hope I can get some pants and some shirts and some hats that all match the same red, and we'll continue to hope it gets better.
Hello, everybody. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio, and thank you for enjoying our content and videos. And make sure you hit that subscribe and notifications toggle so you don't miss out on anything, whether it's Indiana Hoosiers, the Boilers, the Colts, the Pacers, Indiana high school action, whatever is happening in sports. We're trying to bring it all to you, and make sure you don't miss out on a thing. Again, hit the subscribe button for us. Helps us out a ton. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much.